So this is a video I worked on for a bit, and it's basically about the law of Media Maker and how things are connected. And I had this idea because I thought about making a video how to connect law into the gameplay of the game, but for that to be an effective video, I probably should make a video before that where I cover what important events and such exist in the Media Maker world. And I just thought I would start here with genetic material, which is needed for cloning. That was also the case for before the chorogenic virus and everything, but genetic material was more readily available and not corrupted back then, so cloning could be attempted as early as the 20th century. And then in 2032, the chorogenic outbreak happened. The origins of it are unknown, and here started things to split up into a few things, like the early Fortalis suits that were designed. They were still not combat ready, but were designed poorly to protect the user from the chorogenic outbreak, and they were created in response to it. We also had the rapid technology advancement to make effective human cloning that was in the 22nd century, which was a cooperation between South Korea and USA, where they first cloned a prisoner. But I think we will go down first to population decline and infrastructure that was destroyed basically through the chorogenic outbreak and it not being able to be contained and eradicated fast enough. And there is a lot here, because that led to global economy breaking down, then to a resource shortage, and through the resource shortage, there are some other things that happened. One of the major events was war between stronger and weaker nations, which led to the development of new weaponry, and also later to the founding of the Salvation Council, which was after some of the more important government countries fell, like America, Canada, the EU and all. And the Salvation Council was founded then to protect important people, to have infrastructure, to keep everything running. But we will get later to the Salvation Council and now go back here to the ammunition shortage of the 21st century, because that also played into the design of new weaponry, and there is a lot to the weaponry. The weaponry is in three categories: in pre-Salvation Council, in Sanctuary made, and in Wasteland made. The pre-Salvation Council weapons can be put in two weapons. That would be the Arc Barrier, which is a defensive weapon, and the Furix Edge. And both were represented by South Korea and America. Furix Edge was made by Furic rifles, while the Arc Barrier was made in a lab. Basically, it was tried to make a barrier for cities so that the chorogenic virus couldn't enter. But that didn't work because there wasn't a way found to stabilize the barriers that would be this big. But it at least led to the emergence of the Arc Barrier, which was then later made into a Sanctuary-made weapon and categorized as a melee defense weapon. The improved Sledgeblade is also a melee weapon, but the Sledgeblade was originally a Wasteland melee weapon, and the origins are unknown, but it is predicted that it has come from the Georgian or Armenian wastelands, and it was first seen in a tribal defense in the Operation Dawnlight, or maybe not first seen, but it was the was a very effective weapon in the tribal defense in Operation Dawnlight, because Fortalis suits were used, and to be able to break through the armor, the sledge blade was very effective. And there are some things that I don't know exactly about, like who was exactly involved in those operations and the real reason for why. But for now, I have written down Sanctuary and Salvation Council, because those are the only things that should have existed at the moment that would fight against, that would use Fortalis suits. And the tribal defense was maybe led by a clan, or maybe more clans. But yeah. There was also the Wasteland Made ranged weapon, which is the Volt Lancer, and it comes from the Finnish Wastes, although it had a lot of risk involved, where you might kill yourself when you shoot it, which the Sanctuary improved upon and made it so that it only is harmful to enemies. And the Falconic Plasma Bow was Sanctuary made by a German Sanctuary, which was then later destroyed when the Chimera War started, which is one of the hugest events, which we cover later. But that's when the Sanctuary fell that made the Plasma Bow. To get back real quick to the Furious Edge is that it was smuggled to the Middle East and African countries because of the resource shortage and the ammunition shortage, to overthrow governments, which led to rebellions. This is basically how the weapons are connected with each other. They were primarily made because of the wars that started to emerge for resources, and to get weapons that don't need much resources. They were developed. Let me quickly show. Yeah, I think we will go to the Fortalis suits again and cover those real quick. The Fortalis suits can be categorized in early Fortalis suits, which then later were made into modern Fortalis suits with additions like combat abilities through biolinks. But also biolinks had their own risks, because if you got them from a nefarious marketplace, there could be nervous damage, your body could be taken control of and you couldn't do anything. Other physical or neurological damage and trauma is also a thing that could have happened. But as long as you didn't get them from a nefarious trader, it should have been fine. But I would also keep an eye on that, because it might also have to do why we were not active for thousands of years. Because maybe the Salvation Council or our Sanctuary did something to erase our ego for a time, or take control of our body and destroy many of our clones. But this is hypothetical and only speculations. The first modern Fortalis suit was the ATA-1, which was later named the Ironside after it was used in the tribe war against the Kashuri tribe, which was a tribe made from diplomats that was backed by the Ironside of the Silk, which seemed to have been a military force that was probably protecting important clans that didn't have the protection of the Salvation Council, and earned food, resources, and all that through such things. But the Salvation Council created the ATA-1 and probably eradicated the Kashuri tribe and the Ironside of the Silk. which then led to the name of the Iron Sight for the first suit. Yes, before we get to the Salvation console, I would like to go back up to processing, and processing is the action of harvesting genetic material to then feed it to the Chimera, basically to test in the Chimera different combinations of genes to see what makes the Chimera could make the Chimera immune or completely immune and resistant to new things of the chirurgenic virus. And this is the most precise method, as you can read here. It would take too much time, and by the time a new technique would be made, which would approximately have taken 1,500 years, by then humanity would be extinct. But the funny thing is, it has been over thousands of years. So humanity is probably extinct at the moment, and only clones are left. Just something to think about. Then the Pentacat, or the advisors, are very important figures that have displayed certain immunities or resistances or adaptation to the chirurgenic virus, and there are 5 at the moment that we know of. And the first is Ava Elpida, born approximately 2255 in Russia or the Middle East. Because their parents couldn't provide for her, they gave her away to an unnamed anti-Chimera tribe. This tribe was then wiped out by a Chimera War shipping cult, and Ava was taken prisoner. After a while, she converted to the philosophies of the clan, and the clan discovered that she was handling the chirurgenic virus better than most, and so they gave her over to a sanctuary to get her tested on things. And after her genetic material was shared with the cooperative of the sanctuaries, she went missing or is dead. We don't know what happened to her. Then the next advisor would be Zelica Fisher. Zelica Fisher was born in England at about A21, which is probably a new designation to not use cities anymore. She was born into the clan Reverium in the time of the Rust War. The Rust War was a big war, but we don't know much about it. Could be something that could be very well integrated into the story or the game. After she was saved by a sanctuary basically, and she as well went missing or is dead after her genetic material was shared. Yusuf Kamalo, or Metamorph, was born 2118 2118 in Fort Cape, South Africa. So basically the parents of Yusuf were they were scientists, and they were working on a cure for the chirurgenic virus, and actually found something that was able to resist or cure or somehow help against it. But the technology was lost after they had to flee to the Robben Island Research Center, where they completed their research. But after that was overrun by raiders, they lost the technology, and it was never recovered, and it could also not be extracted from the genetic material or the body of Yusuf. So it will forever be a mystery what actually was the first thing that was effective against the chirurgenic virus. But Yusuf was extracted by a sanctuary on Robben Island, and also went missing or is dead. Next up is Louis Paris Brown, Prosamogi, born 2036, and he was born in a time where desertification of South America was a thing because of large-scale air purifiers, which probably stopped working properly and did more harm to the planet than expected, which led to probably also the desertification of most of the planet. But he was born in Cabinota, Bolivia, then was taken in by an American research team after surviving in the wasteland for a time, and later died to the cryogenic virus, but he survived through clones, if you can call it surviving. Lastly, we have Emma Marshall Prota, born 2017, and is the only Penticid that was born before the cryogenic virus happened. In America, Philadelphia, she was born and she died. We don't have much more about her or the other advisors, so we will go down back here and the genetics of those were given to the sanctuaries in the cooperative, which basically meant the sanctuaries that worked with the Salvation Council. Now, the Chimera Project. It's a huge point of the entire story and something that we are experiencing ourselves and trying to get to its completion. There was a huge event. It's called the Teapot Massacre, and many chimeras died in this massacre, and sanctuaries needed to be resupplied through cloning of chimeras, which was the most pressing time when chimeras were cloned. And yeah, I wish we would knew more about it, like when did it happen, what was the purpose of it, and who did it. But we don't know this at the moment. But yeah, the goal of the Chimera Project is to make a chimera that is fully immune, which then could lead to a cure, and then rebuild infrastructure and be happy, basically save humanity. But as I already said, I think humanity is already extinct, so there's nothing much to save where we can save the clones. Also important to note is boosts, which are a side product of the Chimera, that are basically a drug that enhances the mind and abilities of the advisors to better support you and give you more chances to gain better things. And the Chimera, it's going way down to the Chimeric War. The Chimeric War is a war that is currently ongoing in the game story, and it started with the fall of global governments, which was the biggest thing that probably ever happened in the story. You could argue that the cryogenic virus was the biggest thing, but I think if the cryogenic virus was handled better, it wouldn't have been that bad. And yeah, fall of global governments was complete anarchy and led to a Chimeric War that has been going on for thousands of years. And it's basically a war between sanctuaries, mostly led by chimeras, to gain genetic material and do their stuff to try and become the supreme being. Another thing of the Chimeric War is obviously the fall of the German sanctuary, and another reason why it was happening is to get full circle genetic materia, which was the biggest thing. Now let's zoom out a bit and go back to our last few points. Let me zoom in, please. And that is... oh, we forgot hardware. Yeah, a subclass of weaponry was the hardware. And hardware is can be easily put in a few things. We have the blast grenades, which were Sanctuary made, but unknown where and when. But it can be assumed that it was made in the Chimera War, because back then, when the Chimera War started, outposts started to be built around genetic material, and to not destroy the genetic material, you couldn't use normal grenades. So the blast grenades were created to be able to destroy things and kill things, but not harm the genetic material. Another hardware is the flash barrier. Its origin is unknown, although it is very well known that it was based on the arc barrier. But we only know that it was first seen in a rebellion in Italy during the Grey Centennial. And this is also an event I would love to learn more about. Like, yeah, a rebellion. Was it just to overthrow Italy? Who instigated it? What were the consequences? What happened after it? And also, who created the flash barrier and distributed it? I could see it be someone from a black market, or someone that stole the technology from someone else, but who knows. The Phoenix pod, nothing much is known about it, so there's nothing I could add to it. The spike drive is something interesting because it was still before the Chimera War, but after the chorogenic virus, and it was used by the Canadians when America invaded them in the 21st century. And the spike drive back then was deadly and led to death, damage, muscle damage and everything. So it wasn't very efficient to use. But through Fortalis suits and everything, the improved spike drive was created, which we use today. Now, we go back to the Salvation Council. The Salvation Council was a council that was created after the countries fell, as I already told you, but it also is very important because through the Global Research Cooperative at the Japanese table proposal, the sanctuaries were made, or basically were created through this idea. And the sanctuaries were built all over the planet in different climates, all to research ways to combat the chorogenic virus and find a cure for it. A few things a sanctuary has is a replay station, then there's the command center and the Phyrexia R70 scouting drone, and the sanctuaries are the main hub for the Chimera Project, which is also a very important point. Now, there are a few other things that are important about sanctuaries, and that would be the Japanese Akita Sanctuary, which was destroyed by a tribe, and the sanctuary housed the Kamaitaichi custodian, which used the Kamaitaichi suit, which is currently missing or dead, but the Kamaitachi's custodian basically destroyed the tribe because the Japanese Akita Sanctuary was destroyed by it. Now, from here we go to the custodian, which is a warrior clone. The first blueprint's origins are unknown, but we know that some sanctuaries have employed neurological dampening on custodians to keep them more in line, as they are hard to predict or control by normal means. The custodian is also a very important figure because it is basically the protector of the Chimera Project, and its main reason for existing is to ensure its survival and completion. Now, there's only one thing left, and that's back to cloning. Because there are still the subclones. Subclones have a lot to them. They where the experiments on them started as early as the 21st century, but back then they weren't as well constructed and very expensive to make, and they only entered the mainstream when the EU used them to defend their borders against raiders. But subclones led to guards, which there are some, and two of them that are not in the game. The first would be the upholder. The upholder was the very, very first guard to ever be created. It was created secretly in Montreal, USA, after the petition to use subclones as defenses in sanctuaries was declined by the Salvation Council, but they still created it. But it was faulty, didn't work well, and was way too expensive to really matter. Now, there's another subclone that was created, and that's the Gruntling. The Gruntling is a subclone that was made for construction. It was meant to build outposts and sanctuaries and everything. But after drones were more frequently used, the Gruntling was of no use anymore and discarded, basically. Another guard is the cannon bag. Nothing much to know here. The Enforcer, which ushered in the second generation of guards. Basically the most important guard to be created, because the Enforcer was the first guard that used partial implants and partial genetics. The Hornet was a next huge step, because it was the first guard that was able to fly. But earlier models had the problem that they became self-aware and killed many sanctuary personnel, and also have the highest kill rate from all the guards on their own sanctuary personnel. Lastly, we have the Warmonger. Nothing much known about them. They are part of the guards, as I told you, but they also were primarily made as the protection for sanctuaries and outposts. They were firstly used for sanctuary defenses before the Chimera War happened, but after the Chimera War happened, they were also stationed in outposts for security, to defend people, to kill people that raid the outposts and try to steal the genetic material. Next up we have the traps, and traps are a lot. First of all, we go over the Plasma Sentinel. This was made on the orders of the Salvation Council to protect influential people, politicians, against rioters, which just intensified the riots after it was leaked, which then basically helped with explaining, yes, as you can see, we need it, so not our fault. Basically a explanation for why it was needed. Ironclaw, Incinerator, Impaler, we don't know much about them. The first trap was the Bullshot. It was made by a sanctuary in Spain. But yeah, sadly that's it. Bomb Ejector was designed on the venting systems of the sanctuaries, and also was often used in sanctuaries on the ceilings to better camouflage it so that people would not notice it when running under it. Corrosive cubes, they had a swirling effect, but that was removed because it was too enticing to guards, which then led to casualties of the guards and also less work efficiency. Yeah. Death Pistons didn't have anything new added. Holocubes were developed by the US military. After the collapse, it was sold on the black market. So basically, after the USA fell, the blueprints for it landed on the black market and then was bought by sanctuaries, and that's how we got the Holocube. I don't know. No one saw this. This impeller doesn't exist. Yes, doesn't exist. Well, yeah. That's pretty much everything we know that's important in the law. And based on that, I can go and make a video about how it could be implemented into the game itself. I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time. Goodbye.